Well, Rocky, it is 1 o'clock. So this is David Briggs. I'm the chairman of the Co-op Council. I think we'll call the meeting to order. I'd like to welcome everybody to our 75th anniversary. Who would have thought 75 years ago we'd be interacting like this? Of course, we didn't have computers 75 years ago, but definitely a different time. It's my pleasure to welcome all of you to the 75th annual meeting. It's my pleasure to introduce Speaker Chuck Connor, the President and CEO of the National Council of Farmer Cooperatives. Chuck Connor became President and CEO of the National Council of Farmer Cooperatives on January 22nd, 2009. As President of the NCFC, Connor oversees the organization's work to promote and protect the business and public policy interests of America's farmer-owned cooperatives. Prior to joining NCFC, Connor had served as the Deputy Secretary at the U.S. Department of Agriculture since mid-2005. In this capacity, he was the Chief Operating Officer overseeing day-to-day operations of the department. Connor interacted directly with President George W. Bush and his senior staff to formulate domestic and international food, trade, security, and energy policy. From August 2007 to January 2008, Connor served as both USDA Secretary and Deputy Secretary. He played a key role in developing the administration's immigration policy, including important changes to the H-2A program. Connor's experience also includes the assignment of Special Assistant to the President and Executive Office of the President from October 2001 to May 2005, working on the 2001-2002 Farm Bill to develop the strategy behind the transfer of several USDA agency functions to the newly formed Department of Homeland Security. From May of 1997 to October 2001, Connor served as President of the Corn Refiners Association. He also served for 17 years as an advisor to U.S. Senator Richard Lugar of Indiana. Connor is a graduate of Purdue University with a Bachelor's of Science degree and is a recipient of Purdue's Distinguished Alumni Award. He and his wife, Drew, have 4 grown children and 7 grandchildren. Chuck, I turn the platform over to you.
All right. Well, David, thank you for that introduction. And I think if we bear with us, I think Rocky or Ed or somebody is going to put some screens, some slides up on the screen that I'll sort of use to guide me. Perfect. And I assume everybody can see that at this point. So if I could just ask you to go to the first slide after this. And I'll begin this discussion. We chatted just briefly. Yeah, just bear with us, folks. I was on a Zoom call yesterday, and my daughter, my grown daughter, is actually living with us and has closed down her apartment and is working from our house. But she has this dog that has the most piercing bark. So every Zoom call I was on yesterday, that dog just chose that time. So we're all learning to show each other a lot of grace in the world of Zoom and virtual. And thank you for your patience here as we work our way through. I was originally intending to run my own slides, and my communications director, who's kind of a tech savvy sort of guy, said earlier this morning, said, "Chuck, are you sure you really want to do that?" And he encouraged me to not be responsible for my own technology here. So thank you to Rocky and Ed and their team in working through. Let's talk, folks, a little bit about the presidential election. Obviously, it's still dominating the headlines. Let me just start by saying I'm going to talk to you today on a basic premise that Joe Biden will become the president-elect and eventually be inaugurated as the next president of the United States. And I know in doing that, that's a controversial thing. It's controversial within my own family. But, you know, as I observe things, and I'm not in any way making judgment calls on the Dominion vote counting machines or anything else of the consequence, but I just, my own view of these things is that no matter what happens in that context, we're still headed towards probably Joe Biden being inaugurated that 3rd week of January. And that's what NCFC is planning for in terms of being a voice for you, all of you in Washington, D.C. It was a horrible fought election, as you know, the worst I've ever seen. And I've been pretty close to a lot of presidential elections, and they've all, it's not a pretty process, but this one was especially unseemly. And I'll just tell you before moving on to the next slide that here would be my advice to Joe Biden. And it's, believe it or not, it's the same advice I would have given to Donald Trump in 2016. I told several people in 2016 that President-elect Trump needs to be very, very careful, because he needs to understand that he did not win the presidency of the United States in 2016. His opponent lost the election, and Trump, was the recipient of his opponent, in this case, Hillary Clinton's loss. She was unpopular. She was, all the things. And basically there was just a lot of votes around the country of, we're voting for anybody but Hillary Clinton. And, not that that's any big, great revelation, but it impacts your policy a little bit if you have been, sort of won on a landslide versus the recipient of someone else's unpopularity. And it greatly impacts, and I don't think the president ever fully realized that. And because of that, he took on a lot of initiatives. And you guys know I'm a Republican and supported Trump. He took on a lot of initiatives that you sort of needed, if you will, a red wave to ride in order for those to happen. And he didn't have a red wave because Hillary lost the election. Now, let's roll the tape forward, though, to where we are in 2020. And I would almost say those exact same things to President-elect Biden, to Joe Biden. Joe Biden, in fact, I would say it even with greater emphasis. Joe Biden, nobody voted, very few people voted for Joe Biden. Very, very few. He was not, there is no wave there. There's no nothing, because it was a complete, we're not enthusiastic about this guy within our own party. And then, of course, on top of that, the unpopularity of Trump, led to Biden be the beneficiary of that. And so in many ways, again, Biden didn't win the election. Trump lost it. And, my advice to Biden is don't make the same mistake Trump had by thinking that you have a mandate from the people to engage in every single thing that comes down the pike. Pick a few things, and really focus on them. And that would be my advice. My guess, Biden wouldn't listen to that advice any more than Trump would have listened to it. But I just sort of give you that as an insider's observation here, is that's going to be initially where the wheels are going to come off the track with the president, as he's going to think he's got some big wave. He's going to, be involved in, dozens, if not hundreds of different policy battles. And at the end of the day, he's going to look back and is like, what did I win here? And he just needs to be careful on that. But again, it's just a very, very ugly presidential election process. And I did say to a group earlier, I will tell you that I predicted Biden would win, because I said Trump, the Electoral College does not afford Trump the opportunity to make a mistake. He can't slip up in Pennsylvania. He can't slip up in Michigan. He can't slip up in Wisconsin and still mathematically win the Electoral College. Biden, on the other hand, had a few mulligans. He could lose several states and get them switched back and forth and still have many pathways to the presidency. And in a way, that's kind of what ended up happening here. Biden just had too many pathways to win, and Trump had one. And it was the same pathway that he had in 2016, but there were no other options for him. And so in that regard, I think just the odds are, we're always against Trump in that, and it sort of played out that way as well. Let's go on to the next slide, though, and it just sort of highlights again, folks, people always ask, and I don't have the words to describe just how our political system is breaking apart, right in front of us. I said to Dave Beckman and others earlier before the call started, I live outside of DC in the suburbs, and I will not go into the District of Columbia at night right now, because the unrest and the protests over the election and just over things in general is so strong out there that I would not feel safe being there. Some of you have heard me say before that our political system is going to have to learn how to adapt to the world of social media and to the world of in effect, instantaneous sort of information flowing out there. I've described a scenario where it used to be in Congress, and I served there for 17 years, that a member of Congress an issue would come up. They would, learn about it. They would vote on it. They would have the opportunity to discuss it. They would, ultimately vote. It would pass or fail, and then they would go home and sort of explain to their constituents what they had done. And Social Security, I voted to do this because it was, ultimately with this information, it makes Social Security more viable, or something sort of to that effect. They had an opportunity to explain themselves, is the bottom line. In today's world of sort of instantaneous communication and social media, these politicians literally after they go vote, by the time they get back to their offices from voting, oftentimes their social media accounts are lit up. And it's not with compliments. The social media is not used much for complimenting. And it's usually people that are saying, you stupid moron, what did you just do? And because of that, our politicians walk around on eggshells, afraid that they will sort of be the next virtual event that occurs out there that will trend against them. And, they're scared to death to legislate. And our country's got a lot of problems. And every year now we set a new record for the fewest number of bills passed. And that's not because Congress is sort of limiting the scope of government at all. It's because they're afraid to pass bills, because they'll create controversy, and they won't even get a chance to explain the context of the vote, because social media, cable TV, everything else will have already sort of judged and tried them, and in some cases crucified them. So it's a tough political environment right now that I don't claim to have the answers to, but we are on a pathway that is really sort of an alarming thing going forward. And we've got to figure out how to empower our politicians to be able to make tough decisions in behalf of the country without sort of, being a cave to all the fears of modern communication that are out there today. Let's go on to the next slide, if I could. Just to get you into a little more detail about these races, these are maps you guys have seen, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time on them, but you can sort of see what we believe to be the final count in the electoral college circumstance. For those of you who track this is very, very close to the numbers that Trump had in 2016, only obviously flipped, in reverse, with Biden winning by a similar margin as what Trump did the last time around. I suspect Biden's team, again, ignoring the advice that I talked about earlier, will claim that this is some kind of a big blue wave, and that that they won overwhelmingly. I don't necessarily see it that way. You flip a couple of states, and those numbers are almost dead even. And so, this is a very, very close electoral college vote, and one that sort of reflects that divide in the country. And the thing I always maybe love, or at least note about these maps, is when we talk about the middle part of the country, and how that is so politically different than the coastal areas. It's just remarkable to sort of see how that that works like that. And by the way, folks, if anybody has any comments, just speak on Zoom. I think you have a raise your hand feature. That's not something I usually work well with. Just interrupt me, and we'll go to a question or a comment that you may have on something. So let's go on to the next slide then. This is a map of the Senate. This is obviously a very, very critical circumstance going forward. For those of you who are, who lean Republican or lean conservative, however you want to characterize it, this is probably your most fundamental point that you need to keep track of, and that is who's going to end up controlling the Senate of the United States. Right now, Republicans have 50 confirmed votes out of 100. So they've got exactly half. But I think most of you do know that if it were to end up as a 50-50 tie between Republicans and Democrats, the vice president of the United States is the tiebreaker. And of course, that's Kamala Harris. So that would put, in effect, Democrats in charge of the Senate. Those last two seats are in Georgia. And I think most of you know this. I will tell you, I would just hate to be from Georgia right now, because over the next 30 days, they're going to spend close to $200 million on media advertising for these two Senate seats in Georgia. They will break every record imaginable. There will not be a television commercial. There will not be a radio ad. There will not be a pop-up on social media that will not be about this race, because it's for the whole enchilada. Control of the United States Senate is at stake. If the Democrats were somehow able to get both of those and have control of the Senate, we know that they would then have the presidency, the Senate, and the House, and it would be off to the races. They would be ready to rock and roll and pass. They could pass just anything they wanted. So again, if you lean Republican, you want Republicans in control of the Senate as a check and balance to the White House being with Biden, and of course the House being still with the Democrats. And we're going to talk about that now if we go on to the next slide. This slide doesn't make much sense, I realize, and don't try and read it, and I won't either, but it's basically making the point of sort of where all of the unannounced races are. I think most of you know there's 435 members of the House. They have called 423. So there's 12 races that are still yet to be called out there. And I think as it is right now, Republicans have gained 7 seats in the House. And when they announce these next elections results, Republicans will likely pick up an additional probably 5 to 9 of those remaining seats. So somewhere around the 15 range is what Republicans are expecting to pick up in terms of Democratic seats from last time, to sort of narrow that gap of the Democrats' majority. This is a very, very significant thing, you guys. I'll just tell you that. Typically, you never gain House seats in a race where you've lost the top of the ticket, in this case, the presidency. If you would have told me a month ago that Donald Trump would lose and that we would gain and Republicans would gain a bunch of seats in the House, I would have said mathematically impossible, just can't happen. But here it is, it has happened. And I think Speaker Pelosi really needs to sort of take note and learn a lot from this. I think what she needs to learn is that a lot of people across the country do not want a House of Representatives that is governed by the progressives, by the AOCs and others within the far, far left wing of the Democratic Party. They have been giving those people too much attention. And I think the voters sort of spoke that even in a bad year for Republicans at the top of the ticket, they're going to have a gangbuster event here in the House, picking up a lot of seats, having the narrowest of political margins to operate under, and putting the Republicans within easy striking distance in 2 years to take back control of the House. So, just very, very interesting dynamics. But this was, as much as Trump was bad news on election night, this is phenomenal news for the Republican Party, the gains that they were able to make in the House of Representatives in a bad year. Let's go on to the next slide. So some of the big picture takeaways, I've told you a little bit just in terms of my big picture takeaway, is that Biden didn't win, Trump lost. But the turnout rate was a pretty remarkable thing. And I think all of us would say it's good that people exercise their constitutional authority to vote, right? That's a good thing. I don't think anybody would say we don't want, a lot of people voting. And because of that, I will just tell you, there's still a lot of controversy out there over how we voted this time because of COVID. Vast majority of the people had already cast their vote before Election Day, through electronic and other means. And given the vote count that occurred there, it's my own view, you guys, going forward. And I say this as one who probably on balance would say that we ought to vote on Election Day. That would be my own personal opinion. But I don't think we ever go back from the type of voting that we've just been through, where people are going to have the opportunity weeks, if not months in advance, to go ahead and cast their ballot that way, far more than the traditional absentee ballot system that we've had in place. Just because, again, I think overwhelmingly people would say they like the idea that a good chunk of the people that are eligible to vote actually did vote this time around. So record turnout. Trump got more votes than any Republican candidate ever, and as did Biden. And Biden got even more than that. But they both set records in terms of total vote count. I think we all know that Trump won the rural areas like we would expect him to do. I haven't seen the precise numbers, but I think when the tallies are all done, it's probably going to show that 75 to 80% of farmers supported President Trump's reelect. Certainly the rural areas came through in pretty substantial ways. The urban areas did what you would expect them to do, and that is they voted Democratic. Doesn't matter who's on the ticket, they're going to vote Democrat. But the presidency was won, I think, in the suburbs where typically you have more of, a lot of suburbs with a 50-50 kind of split. I think the numbers are going to show that Biden did extremely well among suburban women. And historically, that's been a strong Republican vote. Mitt Romney, for example, took a majority of what you would call suburban women votes, even though he lost. He got the majority of those. I think the view is that Trump probably lost 70 to 80% of suburban women in this race. And that was a huge factor ultimately in his losing effort. We've already talked a little bit again about the phenomenon in the House and in effect how ticket splitting, occurred there. People voted, did not vote for Trump, who then turned around and voted for a Republican member of the House. And again, that's a pretty unusual thing. And we'll have to see whether that ticket splitting has not been a very common thing in recent elections. Maybe we're going back to a time where that's going to become more and more common. And again, folks, just in terms of the future of the Republican Party and where they go from there, one of the things, I'm sure a lot of Republicans hope that, we can move on from Trump just because he's been such a lightning rod. But one of the things they're going to have to figure out is, while they may want to move on from Trump, they've got to be able to replicate his ability to get his base, the Republican base, out and voting, because he proved that time and time again. And he proved it in a way that the people he was getting to the polls to vote for him were not the people that, traditionally voted. And that's why all this polling information was so wrong. I mean, I don't know if you guys paid any attention, but the pollsters just, they could not have been more wrong on any front than what they possibly were in this. They were the true losers of election night, were the pollsters. Just one race after another, starting with the presidency and just working their way down. Their numbers were not only wrong, but 10, 15, 20 percentage points off what it wasn't just a few of them, all of them missed this mark. So, in the modern world we have today, the ability to project who's going to vote whom really needs to be reassessed and evaluated, or not say anything at all, because they had so much to say and it was just all bad information. And we can argue and debate whether that was intentional on their part or not. And, who knows on that, but they were just flat out wrong on that. All right, let's transition a little bit here and go to the next slide, folks. And you can go on to the next slide from here. The likely scenarios here. What does all this mean? Biden, a narrow margin in the House, and then presumably a Republican-controlled Senate, so a divided government. I think trade is going to be very, very interesting in this. Obviously Joe Biden has a long track record as a politician. He's been an elected person for well over 40 years, House, Senate, vice president. So there's a huge track record there on all issues, but trade in particular. And I will just tell you, I've observed firsthand. Joe Biden is typically, historically, not a free trader at all. He and then wouldn't be considered pro-trade at all. He represented Delaware as an old steel and manufacturing state that had lost, tons of jobs, was, kind of part of the Rust Belt sort of mentality. And Biden, hated trade, and he always voted straight labor union on all these trade agreements. So from a trade perspective, is he going to be more like Trump, or is he going to be more like, others who are far more, willing to engage in trade agreements and trade discussions, whether that's with the EU, the Japanese, Brazilians, whoever that case may be. And I will tell you, I don't know the answer to that. The old Joe Biden would not want to do that, because again, he was he voted straight labor union, given where he was from. Now, obviously, he does not represent Delaware anymore. He represents the entire country. And my guess is he will not want to do much of anything that Trump did. So he's probably going to be a little bit more willingness to negotiate free trade agreements. That would be my guess, just because Trump, that would be sort of the opposite of what Trump wanted. And I think oftentimes Biden is going to just simply be governed by doing the opposite of whatever Trump did. So again, that's a guess on my part, but we are expecting some re-engagement on these trade agreements. The big question mark, and again, one I can't answer, historically, Biden has been very, very tough on China because, again, he represents a manufacturing state. But, what's he going to do with the tariffs on China that Trump imposed? I don't see him, again, he won't want to be Trump, but I don't see him totally reversing Trump's policy on China. I just, the labor unions that he's so close to don't want that. I think most Democratic members would say, don't go over the top and do anything extra for China. And of course, now we've got a lot of Republicans who followed Trump, who were in favor of taking a tough trade stand against China. So I think we're probably stuck with our current China policy for a while. That may be okay, folks, because most of you guys know this better than I do. I mean, the trade activity going on with China right now is pretty robust. We've gotten a pretty good bump on prices of late, and a lot of that is being demand driven, and a lot of that demand is coming from China. They're not quite up to their obligations yet, but they are buying pretty aggressively. And so that's probably a boat maybe that's best not rocked here anytime soon going forward. So that's kind of where I think things stand on trade with Biden. Let's go to the next slide, and we're going to talk about immigration. You guys have, again, heard me for years and years and years talk about agriculture's problem on immigration. 70% of our workforce in agriculture are people who aren't legally here in this country. And that, I continue to say that's not sustainable. We need to fix that problem. We've been trying to do that through immigration reform. We actually negotiated, and I was on the negotiating team that negotiated a bill that passed the House last year that did fix a lot of our immigration and labor problems in agriculture, but we could not get traction in the Senate. And then COVID came along, and the Senate wasn't passing any bills at all. So that sort of died on the vine. But we hope that the Biden team will work with us and try and replicate what we were able to pass in the House last year, and maybe get something through the entire system this year. Because again, this is still a real looming problem for agriculture. If you're in corn and soybean guy, foreign labor is probably, for most of you, it's probably not your top issue, but I will just tell you it's a top issue for a lot of producers out there. It's also a top issue for a lot of the people that are buying your products, and they just can't function without some of this foreign labor, because it's just too difficult to get Americans to do a lot of these jobs. And I don't, I wish that wasn't the case, but it's a fact and it's a reality. And so we, for the sake of all farmers, we really do need to get this problem fixed. The good news for you guys is that NCFC and myself chair the negotiating committee that's doing all the work on this. It's called the Agriculture Workforce Coalition, and we've got everybody from Farm Bureau to all the specialty crop growers and dairy, livestock. Everybody is banded together, and we're speaking with one voice, and that's how we were able to get something passed out of the House last year. And hopefully that one voice will continue and give us a shot to maybe let 2021 be the year where we've actually fixed this problem, which has been around now for the better part of 20 years. So hopefully that's an optimistic tone there going forward. All right, let's look at the next slide then. And this is one, please, folks, don't turn your computers off on me on climate change. I know there's a tendency to do that. You know, I have a tendency to do the same thing with you as well sometimes. Let me just say that President-elect Biden has identified, you know, 2 or 3 issues that are going to be his sort of core focus immediately when he takes office. And passing climate legislation is one of those priorities. I think a debate next year on climate is inevitable. And I saw this coming, and you know, really even a year ago, no matter what the outcome of the election were, I felt like a debate in the Congress on climate was inevitable and was going to happen with or without the support of agriculture. And I began to work with some of my friends that I know well in this business and say, what do we have to do to make sure that agriculture doesn't get a climate bill that, you know, in effect tells us what to do, but instead have a climate bill where we're at the table negotiating something that actually can work for American agriculture and perhaps even enhance our income potential in American agriculture versus, you know, some regulatory bait and switch, you know, where they're coming out and measuring and smacking you and doing all kinds of stuff like that. It seemed like getting a seat at the table was critical in that. And we began to work on that. And some of you may have seen that, in fact, yesterday, the fruits of a year's worth of work was announced in the formation of the Federal Agriculture Climate Alliance. We are co-chairs. I am a co-chair of that alliance, and our purpose was to put forward recommendations for climate smart solutions, but ones that are science-based and that ultimately result in enhanced, not reduced farm income. And again, if you haven't had a chance to check that out, I encourage you to review that information that we put out there yesterday. And this is going to be a big agenda item for us. Again, driven by the fact that President Biden is going to demand legislation, and we can either be a part of that process of producing legislation, or we can sit on the sides and hope and pray that they don't kill us. And I'm all in favor of trying to control your destiny and not waiting on one of these politicians to control your destiny, because that has never worked well, you know, in my 40 years in this business. So it's a great, you know, it's a great area for us. Let me just tell you again, the big question mark here. Most of us have a bad taste in our mouth over climate, because what do we think of when we think about climate legislation? We think about the new Green Deal, right? And again, as I've said earlier, if the House is going to listen to AOC and the other progressives who are proponents of the new Green Deal, there won't be climate legislation next year. You know, there will be a lot of talk and a lot of hype, but no successful efforts, because, you know, they won't be able to put together the votes to produce anything there. Any deal that has a chance at passing this Congress and this, you know, new team coming in can't be labeled the new Green Deal. The new Green Deal is dead on arrival. Climate legislation is not. And I don't know any other way to do that other than just that. We're going to pass climate legislation. We're not going to pass the new Green Deal. And if those two get crossed in any way, that'll be the end of our efforts, and we'll pick up the pieces again at a later time, I suspect. Finally, go ahead here. A couple more issues real quick. Rocky, I hope I'm doing okay on time for you guys. This is an old issue, one that I think most of you guys recognize in terms of our 199 deduction for co-ops that gets passed through to local co-ops and ultimately to farmers. This is an issue we thought we had solved in the last tax bill with you know, some fairly prescriptive legislation to require Congress and require the administration to continue our 199 deduction. That new deduction was called the 199A deduction. As it turned out, Treasury screwed us a little bit here, just to be perfectly candid about it, and they put forward legislation to implement that entire tax bill that did not retain old 199 and tried to make some changes. And we've been pushing Treasury to go back to the original deal here. Our efforts, you know, they were on a very, very fast track to get this done late last year. And I think our efforts at least slowed them down to where they're thinking about it now. But our big question now is that is Treasury going to try and finish this rule before the new Biden team takes over at the end of January? And we don't know the answer to that. I've got a call to discuss that later in the day, but one way or the other, somehow over the next few months, this 199A issue gets worked out. Again, it's our hope that that it is an issue that is a deduction, the same as what we've had for the last decade or so. But we'll see. We've got some hills to climb here in order to retain that deduction. Cargill and ADM still, are out there trying to make sure that the deduction goes away because they don't like it because they don't get it anymore, and they don't like the fact that we are. But I still think we've got a reasonably good chance of retaining most, if not all, of this deduction going forward. But it is going to take some work. Last issue, if you will, put on the next slide. I think most of you know what I've just said about climate, and a big part of our climate initiative that we unveiled yesterday deals with information out there in rural America, information on soils, information on fertilizer applications, and just information, that is generally part of the cloud that we use to make good management decisions to create maximum efficiencies. It's pretty hard to have all of that in place without, strong rural broadband. And this is going to continue to be a big push for us to try and hopefully as part of some kind of infrastructure bill to make sure that rural America does not continue to fall behind in terms of high-speed internet access. We're going to need that internet access in order to achieve what people are wanting us to do, particularly in the climate space, but a lot of other spaces as well. The pandemic has obviously been a huge reminder of that to us, of the need for virtual, the need for access to this kind of technology. I'll just, this hits me personally because there's been a few times during COVID where I've tried to work from our farm in Indiana, and it just didn't work very well because I couldn't download big documents, just didn't have the bandwidth to do a lot of what I can do here in the suburbs of Northern Virginia. And that should not be the case. With rural America should not be disadvantaged in that way. And just know that that's going to be a priority for us as we hopefully see in some kind of infrastructure package move early next year. So Rocky, I think that's it in terms of my slides. Again, all of this obviously is impacted a great deal by the outcome of these elections. We're hopefully going to get that settled here in the next few weeks. And for our part, just know that we are equipped to work no matter what happens in the election, no matter who wins, no matter who loses. NCFC, intends to sustain ourselves and be a voice for you guys, no matter who's in charge. And I think we're well positioned to do that. And so while I may have a lot of strong personal political views, just know that we're going to work in your behalf no matter what the outcome is of any of these things. And I think work effectively, I believe.
Good. Well, thanks, Chuck, for that presentation. Does anybody have any questions for Chuck while we have him here? He does a great job for us in DC.
Well, again, you guys, I miss coming out and joining you guys live. I miss all of my travel of being with you guys. I think it's such a key part of my success and my being able to keep my hand on the pulse of what's going on out there. But for now, this is the best we can do, and I do appreciate giving me the chance to reach out to you guys.
Thanks, Chuck.
Thank you, Chuck. We really appreciate you taking the time and your presentation today, and for all you do on behalf of the farmer-owned cooperatives. Your leadership has been extraordinary for the whole country, and certainly here in Nebraska, we enjoy working closely with you and your organization, your team in Washington. So happy holidays to you. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Rocky. You guys all stay safe. Take care.
All right.
Chuck. So he ended on a good note talking about internet. During his talk, my internet kind of went on the blink, so now I'm working on my phone. So hopefully my phone signal stays strong here. So at this time, we'll commence the business session of the annual meeting. And I'll call upon Co-op Council President and General Counsel Rocky Weber to review the financials.
All right, let me see if I can get it on the screen here, and hopefully we can get this all to working correctly. No. Do you have the financials on the screen?
Yes.
Okay. All right, just briefly, and before I get started here, I hope everybody stays on board with us. We do have a nice video at the end to celebrate our 75th anniversary. I think the business portion of the meeting here will go relatively quickly. Very pleased by the turnout today. I want to thank the University of Nebraska-Lincoln for hosting us on their platform, their Zoom platform today. Larry Van Tassel at the Ag Econ College, and Ryan Evans, who's with their tech department there, is handling this for us and all the technology today, and we really appreciate their doing that. Just real quickly, just as a summary of the financial report of our audited financial statements for the 2020 fiscal year, we had total non-restricted revenues of $892,000, a little over that, and most of that, of course, is dues. We are a dues-based organization, have remained that way. I'm happy, though, that since I began this position, whatever your dues were in 2016-17, as of this year, your dues are that same amount or less. We have not increased dues in the 4 years that I have, almost 5 years that I have been a part of this, and the board has worked real hard with us to make sure that we're keeping those dues as reasonable as we possibly can. Our other big source of revenues, of course, meeting revenue and our education programs. We made money on that last year, as we typically have over the years. This year is going to be a different story. We don't know how our education programs are going to all be virtual. Obviously, we're not going to have income from our annual meeting. And so that's going to be different this year. And we're working through a budget and working through that as best we can to accommodate those changes. Our non-restricted expenses for the year were a little over $771,000. Personnel makes up the majority of that expense budget. Meetings and programs, the workshops and meetings have a significant cost to them as well. And you can see there our other professional fees, rent, and other expenses as they are broken down throughout that statement of activities. If we look next at the restricted fund balance, we were just looking at the non-restricted funds there. On our restricted fund balance, we have several restricted funds that we operate through as well. The first and the largest, of course, is the Fund for Excellence that we use for the support of the University of Nebraska professorship and that position. As of the end of the fiscal year, that had a balance of a little over $500,000. Our PAC at the end of the fiscal year had a balance of $65,000 in it. This was following PAC contributions that were made during the summer, during this election cycle. Since then, we've had PAC contributions come in, and I think as of yesterday, we had around $88,000 in that account. We maintain a national affairs account that allows us to travel to Washington, D.C. if the occasion arises without having to raise money to do that at the time. If we have an issue that requires us to go and take a fly-in and have members go, we maintain a balance in that national affairs account, a little over $60,000. The UNL ticket account, the football tickets, this is money that accrues just a little bit so that we have a balance in there to pay postage and things of that nature. Otherwise, all of the ticket costs and the donation costs are straight pass-throughs from those co-ops who participate in that. And we pass that through directly to the University of Nebraska, but we maintain a separate account. And as I said, there's a little money in there always to pay postage and things of that nature. We've maintained a balance in the energy source sales tax account. Tom Jeffers from Crosby Gunsel tells me that we're very near the end of any protests and other outstanding issues out there. And so we will likely be refunding to those cooperatives who participated in that. We'll likely be refunding that balance in this coming year. And we have legacy initiative account balance of a little over $17,000 that we'll continue to use for young member events and planning and working on the legacy issues that were identified during that project. We want to look at the statement of financial position then for the year ending in 2020. We had total assets of a little over $2.2 million. Our current liabilities were at that point, at the end of the fiscal year, $535,000. Although most of that, the vast majority of that, I'd say all but maybe 10 or 15 or 30,000 of that was prepaid dues. I think almost $500,000 of it was prepaid dues that were on the accounts on the books as current liabilities at the end of the fiscal year. They have, of course, now been brought in as income for this fiscal year. And so we end up with net assets then of $17,000 or 1.7 million, I'm sorry, and total liabilities and net assets of $2.2 million. We do have an annual report that's going to be coming out. We don't have it quite completed yet. It will have our full audited financial statements in that audit report. And if any members have any questions, of course, about any of these issues, please feel free to contact David or myself or anybody on the board. The board earlier today reviewed our full financial statements with the auditor and accepted those financial statements as fairly and accurately presented in accordance with normally accepted accounting principles. So are there any questions from anybody on the program here today with regard to our financial status? Not hearing any questions, David. I think I'll pass it back to you.
Okay, thanks, Rocky, for that report. And so this time it's time for the chairman's report, and I'll provide that. I'd like to again thank everybody for coming into the 75th annual meeting for the Nebraska Co-op Council and participating in this new Zoom platform. We're all learning about Zoom this year. Usually at this time, I have the board stand as I introduce them. So maybe you can just wave as I introduce the board members. We have a very good board that attends every meeting and provides good leadership and input into our activities every day. So Vice Chairman is Dean Turnus, from the manager of Farmers Pride Co-op in Battle Creek. Secretary is Dave Beckman, Board Chairman of CVA in York. Tim Rowe, Board Chairman of Country Partners Cooperative in Gothenburg. Evan Brandis, Vice Chairman of Aurora Cooperative. Galen Kuska, Board Chairman of Farmers Cooperative Dorchester. Bart Mosman, Manager of Farmers Cooperative Hemmingford. Jeremy Wilhelm, Manager of Frontier Co-op in Lincoln. Mike Heckner, Central Region President of CoBank in Omaha. And I'm David Briggs, Manager of Wesco and Alliance. And I have the pleasure of serving as chairman. I'd also like to thank all the individuals who serve on the Legislative Advisory Committee, the Excellence in Cooperative Education Committee, the Political Action Committee, and the Hall of Fame Committee. When you get your report that Rocky referenced here in a few weeks, those members will all be listed in there. And every one of those people are very important to us, helping us to finish our mission, which our mission is to defend, protect, and enhance the agriculture cooperative movement through proactive programs in education, legislation, government affairs, communication, and regulatory issues. 75 years ago, our cooperative forefathers saw the need for a statewide council. They served their members who were working the land to raise their families and feed the country. Today, the need for a statewide council is just as evident as our members work every day in finding a way to feed the world. In addition to our work at the Nebraska legislature, we increasingly have relied on our Nebraska Co-op Council to assist us on federal issues that impact our co-ops and members. Most of the Nebraska cooperatives participate in the co-op retirement plan administered by the United Benefits Group in Kansas City. For several years, we have asked Congress to provide some relief from the increasing premiums charged by the Pension Benefit Guaranty Corporation, more commonly known as the PBGC. Rocky Weber was very instrumental in helping tell the story and notifying our members when the appropriate time is for us to arrange or to encourage our elected officials. During 2020, Congress passed legislation which was signed by President Trump that allowed the co-op retirement plan to reduce the cost by 2% of payroll. This is a huge benefit to our cooperatives, and Rocky's support was invaluable as we worked on this topic for 4 years. In June, we met in North Platte to review the budget. The budget approved by the Board of Directors for the 2021 fiscal year is 8.5% lower than last year's budget. Following the unfortunate passing of Glenda Gaston in January, our Co-op Council office worked diligently to keep all the council functions going, and through some outsourcing and realigning of duties, we believe the council can operate on 3 full-time employees. Deb, Ed, and Rocky, thank you for all your efforts during 2020 as we worked through all the difficulties of losing a fellow friend and employee while still providing our co-ops with outstanding service. We've all learned to live our lives differently this year, as evidenced by this virtual meeting. However, we did still plant and harvest a crop in 2020, as well as care for our livestock daily. The American farmer is not only an essential worker, with the solid foundation of morals and work ethic that our great nation was founded on and continues to rely on in tough times. Thank you to each one of our Nebraska producers and cooperative employees who assist them in feeding our nation and world every day. All years have their struggles, but 2020 added a pandemic to the usual struggles of weather and markets. However, despite all the struggles presented to us in the last year, the co-op system is alive and well in Nebraska, in large part due to the work and vision of those co-op leaders 75 years ago who founded our council. Thank you for your continued support of the Nebraska Co-op Council. And at this time, I'd be happy to take any questions. Hearing none at this time, it's time to have Tim Rowe present the Excellence in Cooperative Education Report. Tim?
Yeah, thank you, Dave, and thank you for your remarks. A little bit of history, background of the Educational Committee. The Director, Managers, Employee Education remains one of the key missions of this council. The Excellent for Cooperative Educational Committee is made up of 3 individuals, including representatives from the council's board of directors, as well as local co-op board management, participating members, and NCC staff. The committee realizes that the size, scope, and complexity of today's co-ops is much different than a decade ago. In fact, the pace and change of our economic transition in this digital marketplace is very rapid. Now, more than ever, it is imperative that the council educational program is current and is a value of the council members. So early each spring, after completion of the winter educational programs, the Education Committee meets and assesses the effectiveness of our programs and the membership's education needs for the upcoming year. We did that again this past spring. However, due to the pandemic, our programs will look much different in this upcoming year, and we'll get back to that later. The council continues to draw on multiple experts from across the country to help meet the educational needs of the cooperatives that increasingly require a higher level of sophistication to meet the needs of their cooperatives. Attendance and evaluations have been strong for the Director Manager Workshop, the Director Certification Program, Cooperatives for Tomorrow seminars, the Graduate Director Seminars, and the Board Leadership Seminars. Last year, 280 participants attended these programs, with 78% of our local membership cooperatives attending at least one of the programs. The council also hosts the Nebraska Cooperative Intern Retreat. While we originally planned to do this in person, due to the pandemic, our plans had changed, and we offered 3 Zoom meetings that were July 20th, 22nd, and 24th of 2020. Each call focused on different topics. The first Zoom was the overview and the context of the entire Nebraska cooperative system. The second Zoom was a 3-panel, 3 CEOs to explore the value of the farmers' earnings patronage and holding member equity. The final Zoom was a panel of ag producers who sit on their local cooperative boards, who address what they need from their local cooperatives and how the local cooperatives can best serve those needs. We had 77, 82, and 89 participants in each of these 3 sessions. Given the positive feedback, we plan on offering that again next year. Youth programming is sponsored through the Nebraska Cooperative Council Educational Foundation, along with the assistance of CHS Foundation Cooperatives Educational Grant. 10 years ago, in 2011 and 2012, we implemented the Co-ops 101 presentations for community college ag students and for urban high schools. Since that time, we have conducted 128 presentations in which a total of 2,261 students have participated. This includes presentations to Central Community College, both in Hastings and Columbus, Southeast Community College at Hastings, or Beatrice, Northeast Community College in Norfolk, and Nebraska College of Technical Agriculture at Curtis. along with the University of Nebraska, both in Lincoln and Kearney. In addition, upon request, we have conducted Co-ops 101 presentation in several high schools, which include Omaha Bryan, Blair High School, and a joint session with Lincoln Public Schools, Southeast Community College of Academics. The foundation continues to support the Nebraska FFA Cooperative Speaking Contest, which annually has 60 to 80 students developing cooperative speeches. We have found that the students preparing for the contest has significant contacts with the local managers, employees, and board members as they prepare. While the district contest was completed prior to mid-March, the state FFA convention was canceled due to the pandemic. In late June, the state FFA conducted the contest via Zoom. This was certainly different. However, we appreciate the effort of the students and the teachers to complete this activity. The council continues to provide updated cooperative curriculum materials to 193 FFA chapter teachers in the state of Nebraska at the local high schools. Over the past 5 years, there's been 35 new programs that have opened across the state. The council provided our cooperative curriculum materials to each of these new chapters. The UNL cooperative class was initiated in 2014. And it continues on each fall semester, and it's a 3-credit-hour class. With the departure of Craig McGee late last summer, Rocky stepped in. He taught this class this last fall, and we thank Rocky for doing that. It sounds like there's 26 students that participated in that class this last semester. The council will continue to utilize input from the Education Committee for the and the expertise of national recognized facilitators to meet the educational needs of the local directors. Due to the pandemic, this year's programs will provide a very much different platform than we normally use. All the programs will be delivered virtual Zoom. To kick off, the Nebraska Council, along with Iowa, Kansas, Oklahoma, and South Dakota, are partnering to offer what we will call the Director Management Workshop. The webinar will be held on December 8th from 9 o'clock till 12 o'clock noon Central Standard Time. And this will feature Britt Shoto from Aimpoint Research, who will provide a battlefield intelligence update summary that will address how the impact of the COVID-19 global pandemic will affect producers, customers, retailers, and processors. Britt will identify how the economic of the pandemic will impact the farmer of the future projects and how farmers and retailers will need to respond to these changes. The Director Certification Program will take place on January 4th, 5th, 6th, and 7th. And we'll conduct one phase of the program each day virtually. On February 3rd, we will hold the Graduate Director Seminar for those directors who have completed all 4 phases of the DCP and have served on the local co-op board for several years. This year, the GDS, also held virtually, will focus on market segments and how cooperatives can bring value to each segment in their marketplace they serve. Dr. Scott Downing from Purdue will be the presenter for this program. The council is continuing to develop plans for the board leadership seminar that's held in February, but due to the pandemic, we're not sure how those plans will finalize and work out. We anticipate that the use of the VIAL program will provide opportunities for the council to drop in focused, short online programs from time to time that will be more value to the directors, managers, and employees. Detailed information on all these programs as they develop will be forwarded to each of you. In closing, I would like to thank my fellow excellent Cooperative Educational Committee members from across the state for their efforts to help make this educational program a success. I would also like to encourage each and every one of you guys to participate in the educational program. There's a number of highly qualified experts who will be presenting at this year's programs. So I hope that you'll be able to take advantage of the opportunity that'll benefit you and your local co-op at the same time. Again, I would like to thank Ed, Rocky, and Deb for their efforts to putting all this together. I think you guys done a heck of a job. Are there any questions?
Okay, thanks, Tim. So at this time, I'll call upon Dean Turnus to present the PAC report. Dean serves as the vice chairman on the Co-op Council Board of Directors. He also serves as the chair on both the LAC and the PAC committees. Dean?
Thank you, David. The Nebraska Co-op PAC background. In 1999, the Council Board of Directors established the Nebraska Cooperative Council Political Action Committee, PAC, after careful study and guidance from other organizations and former state legislators from Omaha. Our PAC is governed by a 9-member committee, 5 cooperative managers, and 4 producers. The Nebraska Cooperative PAC fund can only be used for state legislative elections and/or ballot initiatives that may affect our cooperatives. It cannot be used for other elections for governor, secretary of state, public service commissions, or federal elections. All contributions are voluntary. For the 2020 legislative cycle, our PAC contributed $46,550 to 43 senators and candidates. Last year, we received $27,710 in PAC contributions from 24 local supply marketing cooperatives, 4 other active members, and 8 participating supporting members. So far in 2020-21 fiscal year, we have received $23,500 in PAC contributions. Historically, from when PAC was organized in 1999 through October 31st of this year, Nebraska cooperatives and stakeholders have contributed over $408,000 to the PAC. Our PAC has contributed $400,000 to 263 state senators and candidates for their election campaigns. This July, the PAC spent 2.5 days interviewing 17 candidates, with 2 days in La Vista and a half a day in Lincoln. These are long days for all committee members. 25 districts had elections. The senators for 6 of these districts were term limited out of legislative, and current senators for those remaining 19 districts ran for re-election. Based on the November election results, 2 incumbents were turned out of office at the start of the 21 legislative session. There will be 8 new senators. One of the outcomes from the PAC interviews with legislators from Omaha, Lincoln, and some rural agricultural communities is that the candidates are totally surprised by the gross sales, net savings, number of employees, and total economic impact the cooperatives have on the producers' ownership and as well as the producers' ownership with their respective cooperatives. During our interviews, the committee specifically devotes time to what we call Co-op 101. By that, we address what a co-op is, how they function, why they are different from an investor-owned business, and the importance of the cooperative to the entire economy of the state of Nebraska. We also educate candidates on the legislative issues that may come before them, such as price liens for crop inputs, supplies, grain storage and handling payments, patron health insurance, and property tax relief. Other observations: due to term limits, the role of the Nebraska Cooperative PAC becomes more important. It does not buy votes, rather it enhances access to the legislators. The NCC PAC is designed to complement our day-to-day legislative program. It is where we begin developing relationships with those that have become policymakers. Having the council's PAC has opened doors to those urban legislators within Douglas, Sarpy, and Lancaster counties. It has allowed us to assist rural legislators who are supporters of the cooperative way of doing business. If you are a PAC contributor, we want to thank you for your support. And if you are not, we would encourage you to be a PAC contributor. Thank you. Are there any questions?
Okay, thanks, Dean. So at this time, I'll call on Rocky Weber to give the president's report.
Thank you, David. Appreciate the opportunity to again appear before everybody and talk about the activities of the council this year and what we're looking at for the future. It's too bad we can't all be together in person. I think this would have been a great year. Harvest is done. The weather is good. I think we'd had a good turnout in Kearney and could have all been together. But those moments will have to wait. And hopefully by next year at this time, we'll be able to renew our networking and our getting together in person and doing this in a more normal way. But nothing certainly about this year has been normal. You know, from a legislative standpoint, our big legislative bill this year was LB 1014, which sought to change Nebraska insurance statutes to allow farmers and other self-employed persons to form self-insured insurance pools and get self-insurance for health insurance purposes. Thanks to our excellent work by our lobbying team of Sean Kelly and Julia Plucker, we were able to get that bill introduced quickly, had the right senator from the banking committee introduce it for us. We got a quick hearing, overcame some significant health insurance company opposition. The committee voted it out of committee, and we had that bill ready for final reading the day before the legislature decided to recess due to the pandemic. And so we had to wait until they came back in July and August. In their interim, of course, with the financial situation caused by the pandemic, Land O'Lakes decided not to continue their farmer health plan. But we went ahead when their legislature reconvened. I talked to the senators involved, and we decided we would go ahead and seek this change anyway. So to make sure that Nebraska has the platform for farmers to have self-insured coverage if that opportunity presents itself again. And we're very pleased that we got through final reading right away when the legislature reconvened and the governor signed the bill and got that enacted. One of the huge differences that happened this year from any other normal year is, you know, during legislative session, that's typically what takes up most of our time. And all of a sudden that came to a great halt, I think in the third week of March of this year. And we ended up really having to drink from the fire hose from the federal government and the state government in terms of all the actions that were being taken legislatively and regulatorily on both venues that would affect the cooperatives with spring planting, being on the verge of spring planting. We, of course, were very concerned about whether or not the cooperatives would be able to operate freely, would be able to transport goods and services freely and get the spring planting done. Fortunately, the Department of Homeland Security initially right away recognized agriculture as an essential infrastructure, and Governor Ricketts' office assured us that there would be no way that agriculture would ever have any restrictions placed on their ability to do business. That didn't mean, however, that operations were not affected. And for a 6-week period from that third week of March through the end of April, I attended 15 conference calls with state regulators, with federal regulators, with the NCFC and other ag organizations, making sure that we could get everything done. And these issues ranged everywhere from new hire and seasonal CDLs and how we get those in place for the season, for chemical applicator certifications and those kinds of issues. We had to deal with the federal acts that were passed by Congress very quickly, which included the CARES Act, the Families First Response Act, which dealt with leave issues and those kinds of issues, the Payroll Protection Program to help cooperatives look at their NAICS codes and other things, making sure that they were in a position to work within those programs. On a local level, we had weekly meetings with Director Wellman at the Department of Agriculture and worked very well with him. And he was constantly asking us our input. We were giving that input and we were getting good responses back from him on the issues we were identifying for him. He and Rhonda Lamb, who is the director of the Department of Motor Vehicles, were simply phenomenal during this period of time. And I can't say enough about Nebraska's leadership. The Ricketts administration and Director Wellman and Director Lamb and all those that agriculture had to work with during this period were simply phenomenal. So our spring was spent making sure that we were providing the relevant information to our cooperatives to make sure that they understood all the changes that were being made, and we're trying to facilitate those changes just as much as possible. You heard Chuck talk about Section 199. I don't want to beat that horse too much harder, but I will say that when the new regulations came out from the Treasury Department, they totally ignored what Congress had said about following old 199 and are seeking to remove non-patronage sourced income as part of the calculation for Section 199. I'm pleased that Senator Deb Fischer was one of the few United States senators to really jump on this at our request, understood the issue, and she communicated directly with Treasury Secretary Mnuchin on this issue and really advocated for Nebraska cooperatives on this issue. And we were very thankful that she did that. In addition to that, we were able through the NCFC, the Nebraska Cooperative Council, Matt Caswell from AGP and Don Caldwell from Aurora, we were able to get on a phone call with the legal teams and regulators at the Office of Management and Budget and the Department of Treasury who were reviewing this regulation. And this is part of the steps of finalizing a regulation. It goes from Treasury to OMB for some approval and then back to Treasury. And we had quite a frank call, the three of us with the OMB officials with Treasury listening on the phone, and got pretty frank about what effects this would have on Nebraska cooperatives and Nebraska farmers. And that was on July 2nd. And as far as I know, and as Chuck indicated, that process seems to have been stopped in its tracks. And it wasn't just the Nebraska Council. There were other, from across the nation, other councils, other cooperatives and stuff that also had those meetings with OMB. But I think certainly collectively, they got an understanding that across the country, this was a big issue. And I think this is where the value of cooperatives working together and putting a full court press on regulators can really have and affect a difference. And we thank Senator Fischer again for her work on Section 199, as she's been with us through this process all the way along. I just, Dean gave the PAC report. I just wanted to comment briefly. The PAC endorsed for re-election Senators Julie Slama and Luann Linehan this year. They both won their races. The PAC also gave a larger contribution than normal to Senator Mike Hilders from here in Lincoln, and many observers of the legislature believe Mike will be the next speaker of the legislature. I feel that we got very lucky during a lull in the pandemic, in a lull in the virus rate, that we were able to have our meetings in person. I think we were the only PAC organization that had in-person legislative meetings this year. And I think that does a lot. And I've said this all along, and I say it every year, but the PAC truly is our foundation to our having successful legislative experiences and being able to get our legislation passed and to protect the cooperatives at the legislature. You heard the Education Committee report. Of course, the pandemic throws all of our education programs into a different format, and we've worked hard, and Ed and I have worked very hard to try to recreate these programs in a virtual manner. I believe we have a good slate of programs. They're cheaper than they were, and people aren't going to have to invest the time to travel and be overnight and all those things. And I want to encourage everybody to try to take advantage of those programs this year. I'm pleased that the four other state councils here in the Plain States that we worked with to put on the program by Brett Shadow at Aim Point Research, very pleased to have worked with them. And I think that's a model that we probably will continue to work together and provide some virtual programming together even after this pandemic is over. And Ed and I have talked about this as well. And while education programming provides a great networking opportunity for our cooperative boards of directors and our management teams and things of that nature, we will still have in-person programs. But I think that this does open the door for us to, as situations warrant, as topics come up, if we can find the right person to be relevant on the right topic, to throw a quick 1 hour Zoom program together and hopefully provide more options over a period of time and a broader range of education programs. I think some opportunities are really opened up by this pandemic. David, as David typically does in his report, covers things I had in my report, so I was crossing stuff out as he was talking, and I don't want to repeat myself. David did mention that as 2020 began, we lost our colleague and friend, Glenda, and that's been a difficult thing. But I will tell you that not a day has passed that Ed and Deb and I haven't thought of Glenda. Ed is in his 21st year here at the Nebraska Cooperative Council. Deb in October, I don't think she'll turn on her camera, I wish she would, but Deb in October celebrated her 30th year with the Nebraska Cooperative Council. And I will tell you that I could not have went through all of the changes that have taken place this year and everything we've experienced this year without the loyalty and support that Ed and Deb and the commitment they show to the members of this council and the work that they've done this year to support all of our work. I just could not do this without them. I'm so pleased that to have them with me as we continue to advocate on behalf of our member cooperatives. And so finally, as if 2020 hasn't been challenging enough, we had the opportunity to secure some office space right across the street from the state capitol. And in the middle of December, we will be moving into that office space. The office space itself is a little bit smaller, but we have a dedicated conference room to ourselves. We'll hold not only our board meetings, but we believe that will be convenient for senators to use right across the street and for our meetings with legislative representatives and their staffs. Lots of times they like to get out of the Capitol and not have meetings in the Capitol. And so this is going to be a great convenient location. In addition to that, it has a classroom that can be used by the tenants in the building on a first come first served basis. That we will be able to have our LAC meetings, our PAC meetings, and any other Lincoln or Omaha based meetings that we've been going to hotels for. We will be able to use this space for that as well. And so I'm looking forward to that opportunity, and I appreciate the board authorizing us to make that move and undertake this, because I think it's going to be a benefit for the council and its membership to have that location so close to the Capitol. I thank you in our 75th year here. I thank you for the opportunity to continue to lead this organization, to work with so many of you throughout the year. What follows me here is a video commemorating our 75th anniversary. And as I watched it, after we had it put together, I was struck most by how many people over the years have given of their time and talent to serve the cooperative cause together. We have so many people from so many cooperatives that have worked on committees, on boards, gone to education programs, come to Lincoln when we need people to come and work on some legislators with us, to fly into Washington and deal with issues with our congressional delegation in Washington. And all of us working together is what creates so much momentum and so much strength for the cooperative system in Nebraska, so that when we go to Washington and we go to the legislature, we're respected and we're listened to, and we have good working relationships with all those people. It's all of you out there who work with us that make that possible. And so for all of you, I wish you happy holidays, happy Thanksgiving, and a Merry Christmas. Most of all, I hope you all stay well and keep your teams well. And I'm hopeful that we are going to go through a little bit of a dark time here with this pandemic, but we're going to come out of the other side and be stronger and work harder and be able to enjoy each other again in the future. Thank you. If there's any questions, I certainly welcome any questions. But if not, we can keep moving on. Seeing no questions,
Thanks, Rocky.
I guess, David, I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you. So yeah, the video will be just a little bit longer, so we want to keep you all in suspense till we show you at the end. So at this time, I want to call in Jeremy Wilhelm to give the election committee report.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. First, I'd like to thank the election committee members who assisted us this year. First one, Alan Zump, CEO of Farmers Cooperative Dorchester. Carl Dickinson, CEO of CVA in York. Eric Peterson, Board Chair of Wesco in Alliance. And Bill Schuster, Board Chair of Aurora Cooperative Elevator. This year, there are two positions up for election, a producer 4-year term and a manager 4-year term. I believe the election committee came forth with excellent and capable nominations for this year's elections. The candidates possess a strong commitment to the cooperative way of doing business and to this cooperative trade association. The membership had the opportunity to nominate other individuals over and above the election committee's nominees prior to the voting process. I can report that no additional nominations were received for the membership. The election committee nominated the following individuals who each agreed to run. For the producer, 4-year term, incumbent David Beckman, board chair of CVA York, and Jeff Lotion, board chair of CPI in Hastings. For manager, 4-year term, incumbent Dean Turnus, president of Farmers Pride Battle Creek, and Matt Brockmeyer, general manager of CHS Holdridge. As authorized by the Nebraska Co-op Council Board of Directors, mail ballots were utilized. Each active member appointed a voting delegate who received the ballot and was asked to mail their ballot directly to the council's auditor, Gardner and Company, for tabulation. Results of the mail-in ballots indicate that David Beckman and Dean Turnus have been re-elected to serve on the council's board of directors. David and Dean, on behalf of the council's membership, thank you for your willingness to serve on the council's board. I also want to thank Matt and Jeff for putting their names forward for the nomination. Last, I would also like to announce that on October 9th, the participating members met via Zoom and re-elected Mike Heckner from CoBank to the board for a 2-year term. Mike, as well, on behalf of the council's membership, thank you for your willingness to serve on the council's board. I'll now turn it back to you, David.
Thanks, Jeremy. Thanks for serving on that, leading that committee for us. So at this time, we're going to watch a video that our staff's worked on this year to celebrate our 75th year. And at that, I'll turn it over to the technician back in Lincoln. Turn that on for us.
The Nebraska Cooperative Council is proud to celebrate 75 years of being the only statewide trade association focused on one thing: farmer-owned cooperatives in our great state. In the fall of 1945, a small group of cooperative leaders in Nebraska came together with the belief that Nebraska's farmer-owned cooperatives could better influence public policy and provide an educational platform for its membership by cooperating in these endeavors. In the past 75 years, the membership of the council has evolved greatly, but the mission of the council remains the same: to defend, protect, and enhance the agricultural cooperative movement. The Nebraska Cooperative Council continually and robustly engages policymakers and regulators in Lincoln and Washington, D.C. on a host of legislative and regulatory matters affecting agricultural cooperative interests. Through its Political Action Committee, Education Foundation, and Fund for Excellence, the Council has created a platform from which it broadly educates legislative candidates and Nebraskans from high school through college to strengthen the cooperative system and influence public policy. From the groundbreaking creation of the Director Certification Program to annually hosting an added number of educational programs on emerging issues, the Council continues to educate the Board of Directors, management teams, and employees of member cooperatives.
Hi, this is Governor Pete Ricketts. It's great to be with you virtually to celebrate the 75th anniversary of the Nebraska Cooperative Council. Nebraskans understand that agriculture is the backbone of our state's economy. Your cooperatives are owned by 64,000 Nebraska farmers and ranchers. These ag producers receive the mutual benefit of having an ownership stake in your supply and marketing cooperatives. Local cooperatives create economic opportunity and charitable support in 404 rural Nebraska communities and strengthen the fabric of rural Nebraska. It's important for us to work together on legislation and regulatory issues for agriculture here in Nebraska. Associations like this council allow farmers and ranchers to have a larger voice, and I look forward to continuing to work with you to be able to grow Nebraska agriculture. Thank you again for your great advocacy for Nebraska agriculture. Congratulations on your advocacy for your cooperatives, and congratulations again on 75 years. God bless you all.
To learn a bit more about the past 75 years of the Council, let's join a conversation between former Council President Bob Anderson and current Council President Rocky Weber.
It's our 75th anniversary of the founding of the Nebraska Cooperative Council this year. And we have to do things a little bit differently because of the pandemic. And so we decided we'd put a little video together to walk down memory lane. And I couldn't think of anybody better to walk down memory lane with than you. But you did serve for 42 years as the president of the Nebraska Cooperative Council and led this organization. And so for more than half of its existence, you've played a major role in the council and its activities. So I just wanted to have a conversation with you and walk down memory lane with a little bit. So thank you for joining us today to do this.
Rocky, it's really a pleasure to be here today. It's always nice to visit and talk. And
You bet.
Looking forward to this.
What sticks in your mind most about your time at the Nebraska Cooperative Council? Is there any one event or one series of events that really sticks in your mind the most?
Gosh, Rocky, there's a number of things that come to mind there. And if I can, I think it's important that maybe as I reflect back at it, I go back even before my time to the time when the cooperative leaders in the state got together back in 1945. And we're talking about creating a trade association just for agricultural cooperatives. As you read the communications and what was going on at that time, there was actually two issues that really brought this into fruition. The first one was on the federal level, there was a lot of anti-cooperative legislation that was being advocated by people that weren't really, friends of cooperatives. I believe they were called the National Taxpayers Equality Association. Very, very critical. And with that going on the federal level and the need for education for directors, those were the two reasons that they came into existence. As you reflect upon that, that same mission there is still here today.
On a state level, several years ago, the Nebraska Cooperative Council, under your leadership, developed a political action committee. Can you talk to us about why that was done and what do you see the benefits of that, Bob?
That thing became a reality in 1999, and it really followed closely thereafter the fallout in the ag economy in the 80s, the double jeopardy issue. I kept saying we have to be able to do things differently and better. And how do we do that? And also realizing that every 10 years was having less rural representation. Today, and it was true at that point, we were fearful that there's 3 counties in this state populous, Douglas, Sarpy, and Lancaster County, and it's going to get worse with this next census here that's underway right now with less rural representation. And so we put together a committee to try to see, would a political action committee be advantageous?
You really have focused, and the PAC has been focused on making sure we're educating urban senators and that they're getting to know us before they ever take office.
Yes. And if I can build upon that, we intentionally designed our interview process different than a lot of groups. A lot of groups will have 1 or 2 people. The candidates come in, they make the decision. We felt very strongly that we wanted to have a committee of managers and directors to sit down and interview them, but to make it an educational opportunity in terms of what that co-op brings to the rural area and the state's economy in total, and why we're different. And we always try to have a producer talk about how that value of that co-op benefits his farming operation.
So Bob, another development during your tenure at the Nebraska Cooperative Council was the creation of the Nebraska Cooperative Council Education Foundation. Can you tell us just a little bit about why the council decided to form the foundation, what value you see that brings back to the cooperative members?
Sometimes with challenges comes opportunity. And one of the things that was going on at that time was that with the Internal Revenue Service Code, it was becoming more difficult to get outside money to come in to leverage funding requests, projects that we had that would have been beneficial to our people. There had been some abuses, not by us or others, but they clamped down on that. And so the purity test, if I can use that phrase there, it was much easier for another entity that had a foundation to give to another foundation. It passed the IRS test. And so there was a way of coming in and getting through the paperwork there, fulfilling their mission. They could give the money knowing that they weren't going to have problems with it. And so we could leverage outside money to try to have a better end result in terms of whatever endeavor we was trying to accomplish.
In 1998, the Council established the Fund for Excellence to provide support for cooperative education staffing at the university level. More than $500,000 was raised and has been utilized to provide staffing at the University of Nebraska for cooperative education and research programs.
I also wanted to touch on another important facet of the council that was developed under your leadership, and that was the Nebraska Cooperative Council Hall of Fame.
That also was developed the same year that we developed the PAC, 1999. And as you look back, there have been a lot of people. Those people that organized the council back in 1945, the things that they've done, they didn't do it for personal recognition or what have you. But in life, we're very easy to cast criticism, but we never take the time sometimes to say thank you. And I think that was important.
Congratulations to the Nebraska Cooperative Council on your 75th anniversary. Thank you for all you do for Nebraska agriculture, farmers, and ranchers. Rocky, thanks for your leadership in the organization as we work together on the issues at the national level. We know that these issues are important and we're all in this together. I really appreciate all you do, and I am excited for what the future has in store for the NCC. Thanks for all you do again, and congratulations. Take care.
Education is a priority of the Council, and through partnerships with the University of Nebraska, Iowa State University, the Iowa Institute for Cooperatives, and CoBank, we have developed and maintained a model education delivery method that has served Nebraska cooperatives very well over the years. Since 1964, the Council has had more than 26,000 participants in our various education programs.
Hi, this is Senator Deb Fisher, and I want to say hello and welcome to the board and all council members participating in today's annual meeting. Virtual events seem to be the new normal for us, and I appreciate your continued dedication as we keep moving forward through this pandemic. I want to congratulate you on celebrating 75 years as a trade association in Nebraska. What a huge accomplishment. Whether it's providing market access for ag and energy products, or equipping our communities with broadband and infrastructure, your presence is so important to our state. I know you folks have taken additional steps to serve your member owners and communities during this tough time, and we are grateful for that. As a member of the Senate Ag Committee, I will never stop working to deliver certainty and predictability to our ag producers. I look forward to continue working with you in pursuit of this goal. Again, congratulations. Stay safe and stay healthy.
Cooperation among cooperatives is one of the 7 principles of cooperation. It was in that spirit in 1945 that the Council was founded. And it is in that spirit that the Council continues its mission. The past 75 years have witnessed enormous changes in agriculture and society. That such changes will continue is a given. In the ever-changing environment in which agricultural cooperatives work to meet the needs of Nebraska's farmers and ranchers, a concerted, cooperative effort to continue to protect and defend Nebraska's agricultural cooperatives is as necessary now as it was in 1945. Your Nebraska Cooperative Council, defending, protecting, and enhancing the agricultural cooperative movement.
Thank you. That was very good. So appreciate our staff for all the work on that. And I believe we probably can get that sent out to our co-ops if they want to use that at an annual meeting. Is that correct, Rocky?
Okay, sorry there. You can access it on our website. It will be posted on our website. As far as being able to transmit it, we can probably do that, but we're going to have to figure out a way to do that because it's got a lot of data in it. And so just emailing it isn't going to work. We're going to have to figure out a sharing program in order to do that. But we can figure that out one way or another through either accessing it on our website, or otherwise we can certainly get it to anybody who wants to use it.
Good. Thank you. Thank you. So with that, that's going to conclude our meeting. I do have a couple of last comments. Next year, we hope to be able to have a face-to-face meeting where we can actually do a Hall of Fame meeting again. We chose not to do a Hall of Fame inductee this year because we wanted to give them the proper due with an in-person meeting. So we've chosen to skip this year for a Hall of Fame inductee. And also, just good to see everybody, hopefully face-to-face next year. I think we communicate well through Zoom, but much, much better in person. Also, before we adjourn, I want to remind you on December 8th via Zoom, we're going to have one of our educational opportunities. Brett Sciato is going to present the battlefield update. He's talked to us last year in Kearney. He's going to come back and talk to us this year about how he thinks the COVID issue is going to impact agriculture. I really encourage you, if you've not already signed up, to talk to your manager and get signed up for that. I believe that you'll really be very beneficial. You did a great job last year. With that, I'll declare the 75th Annual Meeting of Nebraska Co-op Council adjourned, and everybody have a very happy Thanksgiving. Thanks for joining us today.